A child sold this, he laughed. But when the maid's daughter stopped the billion-dollar tower from tearing itself apart, his smirk vanished. A maid's daughter sold this. Kenji Tanaka's laughter echoed through the glass boardroom like a thunderclap. His platinum cufflinks glittered against the Tokyo neon glow as he pointed at the trembling tower model on the screen. 3 global firms have failed me, and you think a child has the answer. Amora Washington sat silent, her sketchbook balanced on her knees, every eye in the room burning into her small frame. Executives smirked. Investors whispered in Japanese and Mandarin, and her mother shrank with shame beside her. Then Kenji leaned in, his voice low but venomous. Fine, prove it. Solve the mystery that has humiliated the greatest minds on Earth, and I'll pay you $500 million. Fail, and you'll never set foot in this tower again. The room froze. The hum of the building vibrated through the walls like a heartbeat. A building doesn't have a soul, but it does have a voice. This one was screaming. And in the heart of the glittering metropolis, in a city built on impossible dreams, only a child was quiet enough to hear it. The celestial spire was more than a building, it was a statement. It rose from the Shinjuku district like a shard of polished obsidian, a twisting spear of glass and steel aimed at the heavens. It was the tallest, most luxurious, most technologically advanced residential tower on Earth. It was Kenji Tanaka's monument to himself. At 58, the billionaire developer had a reputation carved from granite and ambition. He had conquered markets in London, Singapore, and New York. The Celestial Spire was his crowning achievement, a project so audacious that other developers had called it impossible. Kenji thrived on the impossible. The tower housed the world's wealthiest people. Its penthouses sold for 9 figures. Its lobbies were decorated with art that belonged in museums. The very air inside was filtered, cooled, and scented with a custom fragrance of cherry blossom and hinoki wood. But for 3 agonizing months, this monument to perfection had been hiding a terrifying secret. The building hummed. It wasn't a mechanical noise. It was a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the very structure. It started as a faint tremor in the lower floors, but now it was a constant, bone-jarring groan that grew louder with each passing day. Wealthy residents complained of migraines and sleepless nights. Crystal chandeliers swayed on their own. Hairline cracks appeared in the Italian marble floors. A $10 million plate glass window on the 87th floor had spontaneously shattered, raining microscopic daggers of glass onto a vacant terrace below. The Celestial Spire was sick, and the sickness was spreading. Maya Washington knew every inch of the tower's glistening floors. For the past 2 years, she had pushed her cleaning cart through its silent, opulent hallways. She was a ghost in this palace of wealth, visible only when a smudge appeared on a surface. At 41, her hands were chapped from chemicals and her back ached with a fatigue that never truly left. But her smile was always gentle, her movements always discreet. Her official title was Environmental Services Technician. The residents, when they acknowledged her at all, called her the Help. She endured the quiet indignities of her job with a grace born of necessity. That grace was for her daughter. Amora was 12 years old, with deep brown eyes that saw everything and her hair styled in intricate braids. She was a quiet, observant child. While other children her age were absorbed in video games and social media, Amora was absorbed in the world around her. She carried a worn sketchbook and a set of drawing pencils everywhere she went. After school, she would sit quietly in a corner of whichever palatial apartment her mother was cleaning, sketching the city below, or the intricate patterns in a silk kimono displayed on a wall. She was as invisible as her mother, a small, silent shadow in a world that wasn't meant for her. But Amora noticed things. She noticed the way the security guard's shoulders tensed when the humming grew louder. She noticed the nervous glances the engineers exchanged in the service elevators. And she felt the building's sickness more than anyone. Sometimes she would press her small hand against a wall, her brow furrowed in concentration, as if listening to a secret conversation that only she could understand. The crisis in the tower was reaching a breaking point. 3 separate engineering firms had been flown in, one from Germany, one from the United States, and one from South Korea. For 94 days, the brightest minds in architecture and engineering had tried and failed to solve the puzzle. Their reports filled 1,000 pages with complex jargon, but they all ended with the same humiliating conclusion: we don't know. The building was a marvel of modern engineering. According to every blueprint and every calculation, it should have been perfectly silent. The hum was, by all accounts, impossible. Kenji Tanaka's patience had evaporated. His morning meetings in the 120th floor boardroom had become legendary for their brutality. He paced the room like a caged leopard. $250 million, he had roared at the lead architect, Julian Croft, during that morning's meeting. That is the value of the contracts I have lost this month. Residents are breaking their leases. New buyers are backing out. The world press is calling my masterpiece the humming tower of terror. This building is becoming a global joke. Julian Croft, a celebrated architect from a prestigious London firm, sat frozen. He and his team had tried everything. They had blamed subway vibrations, faulty construction materials, even seismic microtremors. Each theory had been proven wrong. The hum remained a defiant mystery that mocked their expertise. In the midst of this chaos, Maya and Amora continued their quiet routine. That afternoon, Maya was tasked with cleaning the executive boardroom. Amora sat in a leather chair by the window, sketching the distant, snow-capped peak of Mount Fuji. She was supposed to be doing her homework, but the building was particularly loud today. The vibration was a low, insistent tremble she could feel in her teeth. She watched her mother carefully wipe down the vast table, collecting discarded tea cups. Rumors were flying among the staff about the project being shut down. For a single mother with no safety net, losing this job would be catastrophic. Amora looked away from her mother and out the enormous window. She wasn't looking at the other buildings. She was looking at the wind. She could see it in the sway of the distant ginkgo trees, in the flutter of the banners on the buildings below. She opened her sketchbook. She didn't draw the view. She began to sketch the tower itself, its elegant, twisting shape and the hundreds of decorative fins that adorned its exterior, designed by Julian Croft to give the building its unique sculptural look. Then she began to draw arrows, showing the path of the wind as it flowed around the structure. Her pencil moved with startling certainty. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind, a warm, gravelly sound that always made her feel safe. "Every structure tells a story, kiddo," he used to say. "You just have to learn how to read it. Don't look at what it is. Look at what it does." That evening, an emergency meeting was called. A delegation of investors from Singapore and Hong Kong had arrived, demanding answers. With them was a special consultant, a woman whose reputation was whispered with awe in engineering circles, Dr. Anya Sharma. Dr. Sharma was in her late 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She was a legend in the field of structural dynamics. The atmosphere in the boardroom was thick with dread. Maya was instructed to remain on standby outside to provide refreshments. Amora sat with her, reading a book, but her attention was focused on the low, powerful hum. Inside, Julian Croft presented his team's latest desperate theory about resonant soil frequencies. Dr. Sharma listened patiently, then asked a simple question. "Have you accounted for the von Karman vortex street effect in your aerodynamic models?" The room fell silent. It was a complex principle of fluid dynamics, something most architects only studied briefly in university. It had been dismissed early on as irrelevant. "We considered it," Croft stammered, but the simulation showed a negligible impact. From her seat in the hallway, Amora's head snapped up. She had heard that phrase before in one of her grandfather's old, dusty textbooks. It was about the way wind behaved when it hit a cylindrical object. She looked down at her sketchbook at the arrows she had drawn. Suddenly, just as Dr. Sharma was about to speak again, the building gave a violent shudder. A collective gasp came from inside the boardroom. A long, spiderweb crack shot across one of the massive windows. Panic erupted. Kenji Tanaka stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. "Enough," he commanded. "This meeting is over. Croft, your team is fired. All of you, get out of my building." He turned to the investors. I will handle this. His gaze swept the room and then the hallway. It landed on Maya, who was standing frozen, holding a tray. His eyes, full of rage and humiliation, then moved down to the small girl sitting beside her. "This is what my project has become," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "A circus of incompetence with an audience of cleaners." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She grabbed her daughter's arm, ready to pull her away. But Amora didn't move. Her heart was pounding, not with fear but with a sudden, fierce clarity. She saw the terror in her mother's eyes, the undeserved shame on Julian Croft's face, and she heard the building scream. She stood up. "Sir," she said, her voice small but clear in the stunned silence. "It's not the ground. It's the wind. You're all listening for a hum, but you should be listening for a whistle." 200 eyes turned to stare at her. Kenji Tanaka stared at the child, his expression shifting from rage to disbelief and then to a cruel, calculating amusement. He saw an opportunity not to solve his problem, but to create a spectacle. What he didn't know was that Amora Washington was not insignificant. And the real story of the Celestial Spire was just about to begin. The story of Amora's secret knowledge began not in a modern skyscraper, but in the dusty, sun-drenched workshop of her grandfather. Samuel Washington had been a combat engineer in Vietnam, a member of the legendary U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He had built bridges under enemy fire and designed fortifications in dense, hostile jungles. He was a man who understood how things stood up and, more importantly, how they fell down. After the war, he had worked for the state, inspecting bridges and dams. To the world, he was just an old civil servant. To Amora, he was a magician. He taught her about harmonic resonance, not with equations, but with a guitar. He'd pluck a string and show her how a nearby string would start to vibrate on its own. "That's sympathy," he'd explain. "Everything in the world has a note it wants to sing. If you play that exact note loud enough, you can make it dance, or you can make it fall apart." He told her the famous story of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, the bridge that had twisted itself to pieces in a steady wind. "The engineers who built it were brilliant," Samuel said, his eyes distant. "But they forgot to listen to the wind. The wind played its note, and the bridge sang along until it tore its own throat out." He died when Amora was 10. He left behind a small house, a modest pension, and a workshop full of old books and tools. For his daughter Maya, he left a legacy of quiet strength. For Amora, he left a priceless inheritance, his way of seeing the world. After his death, debt forced Maya to sell the house. They moved to Tokyo for the job at the Celestial Spire, seeking a new start. Amora's inheritance was packed into 2 cardboard boxes, her grandfather's most cherished engineering textbooks, filled with his handwritten notes. Now, standing in that boardroom, facing the cold fury of Kenji Tanaka, Amora felt her grandfather's presence beside her. She wasn't just a scared 12-year-old. She was Samuel Washington's granddaughter. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. Kenji Tanaka walked slowly toward Amora. The cruel smile was back on his face. Well, he said. "An expert has been hiding among us. A child who cleans floors with her mother thinks she can solve a problem that has stumped the greatest engineers in the world." Dr. Anya Sharma, however, was not laughing. She watched Amora with an intense, analytical gaze. There was something in the girl's eyes, not arrogance, but a startling, unshakable certainty. "Since you are so confident," Kenji continued, "I will give you a chance to prove your genius." He spread his arms wide. "My $3 billion building is your puzzle. You say it is the wind. Fine. Prove it. Explain it and solve it." He leaned down, his face close to hers. "Solve this, little girl, and I will give you $500 million. A collective gasp swept through the audience. "But," Kenji said, his voice hardening, "when you fail, and you will fail, your mother is not just fired. You are both banned from this property for life. I will personally call every hotel and residence in this city to ensure she never works in this town again." Just then, Dr. Sharma stood up. "I will act as the official adjudicator for this challenge," she announced, her voice calm and authoritative. "A test of this nature requires a neutral technical witness." Kenji's smile faltered. Dr. Sharma's involvement gave the ridiculous spectacle an air of legitimacy. One of the Singaporean investors nodded. An excellent proposal, Doctor. We are very interested to see this. It was too late to back down. Fine, Kenji snapped. And we will live stream this. Let the world watch what happens when a child's fantasy meets engineering reality. Within minutes, the company's social media channels were live. The title of the stream was simple and brutal, an unqualified opinion, the $500 million challenge. Amora stood motionless. She wasn't thinking about the money or the humiliation. She was thinking about her grandfather's guitar. Dr. Sharma knelt beside her. Young lady, she said softly, you are under no obligation to do this. Samara met her gaze. She said, her voice quiet but firm. My grandfather taught me that you can't fix a problem until you respect it. Nobody is respecting this building. It's not whistling anymore. Now it's starting to scream, and if we don't do something, it's going to tear itself apart. Dr. Sharma stared at her for a long moment. She stood up and turned to the room. Very well, she announced. The challenge is accepted. Let's begin. The boardroom transformed into an arena. Kenji gestured impatiently. The stage is yours, little expert. Do not waste our time. Amora walked calmly to the refreshment cart her mother had been wheeling. She picked up a heavy crystal water glass and an unopened bottle of still water. She walked to the very center of the vast room, knelt, and placed the glass on the floor. She carefully poured water into the glass until it was 3/4 full. The engineers exchanged condescending looks. What is the meaning of this? Kenji demanded. Amora ignored him. Look, she said, her voice clear and calm. Everyone leaned in. At first, there was nothing. Then, as the building emitted another of its low, groaning hums, the surface of the water began to tremble. Tiny concentric ripples appeared, emanating from the center of the glass in a perfect, hypnotic pattern. It's just a vibration, one of the junior architects muttered. No, Dr. Sharma said, her eyes narrowed. Look at the consistency. This isn't chaotic shaking. This is the frequency. Amora looked up at Dr. Sharma. It's a note, Amora confirmed. The building is playing a note. You can't hear it properly because it's too high, buried under the low rumbles. It's like a dog whistle. The sound that's hurting the building isn't the big hum everyone hears. The hum is just the symptom. The disease is the whistle. A whistle. Kenji scoffed. Do you have any proof? Yes, Amora said simply. Can I please see the full architectural blueprints of the tower, the final construction set, and the aerodynamic report from the wind tunnel simulation? The request was so professionally specific it stunned the room. That is absurd, Julian Croft began. Those documents are highly confidential. Dr. Reed intervened, her voice like steel. Mr. Croft, your team was fired for failing to interpret that very data. As the adjudicator, I am formally requesting you provide the documents. Or are you afraid a child might see something your entire firm missed? Humiliated, Croft ordered the files projected on the main screen. A dizzyingly complex 3D wireframe model of the celestial spire appeared. Amora walked toward the screen and asked the technician to isolate the exterior shell and the aerodynamic stress charts. She scanned the complex data, her eyes moving with unnerving speed. There, she said, pointing to a section of the report showing airflow patterns. Your wind tunnel test was right. But you were looking for the wrong thing. You weren't listening. She turned to face the room. My grandfather built bridges. He told me that when wind hits a wire, it sings. If you have a lot of wires, all tuned the same, the wind can turn them into a harp. A very, very powerful harp. She looked back at the screen and asked the technician to zoom in on the tower's profile. These fins, she said, pointing to the hundreds of elegant, blade-like structures running vertically up the building's sides. Mr. Croft designed them to make the building look beautiful. But he did his job too well. They are perfectly spaced, identical in shape, size, and tension. She turned to face the stunned architects. You didn't build a skyscraper, she said, her voice filled with a sudden, profound gravity. You built the largest shakuhachi in the world. The room was utterly still. Dr. Sharma stared at the screen, a look of dawning, brilliant comprehension on her face. Amora continued, her voice echoing her grandfather's lectures. It's called aeolian vibration. When the wind from the coast, which is very steady here, blows past these fins at a certain speed, it creates vortices. These vortices create a pulse, a vibration, a note. Because every fin is identical, they all start to vibrate at the exact same frequency. It's a high G sharp, she pointed back at the glass of water. That's the note right there. Hundreds of them singing together create harmonic resonance. They are amplifying each other. The entire tower is a giant tuning fork being played by the wind. The science was so pure, so elegant that it was undeniable. The floor wasn't a mistake in construction, the floor was the design itself. Kenji Tanaka stared at the screen, his face pale. The architect, Julian Croft, sank slowly into a chair, his head in his hands. An engineer finally spoke, his voice trembling. So what do we do? We'd have to remove every fin. That would take years, cost hundreds of millions. No, Amora said quietly. My grandpa always said the best solution is the simplest one you haven't thought of yet. She walked back to the screen. You don't have to stop the music. You just have to change the song. She took a dry erase marker and drew a small, simple shape on the leading edge of the fin. You need to install these small metal or composite baffles. They only need to be about 2 centimeters tall. You don't put them on all of them. You create a non-uniform pattern. Put one on the first fin, skip 2, put one on the fourth, skip 1. You make them random. This will break up the airflow, create microturbulence. Each fin will start to vibrate at a slightly different frequency. They will no longer sing in tune. They will cancel each other out. She put the cap back on the marker. The whistle will stop. And when the whistle stops, the hum will disappear. The solution was breathtakingly simple. It was an $80 fix for a $300 million problem. The boardroom was silent for a full minute. The engineers stared, their minds racing, seeing the undeniable logic. Finally, Dr. Sharma looked up from her notebook. In my 45 years as a structural engineer, she announced, her voice resonating with absolute authority, I have never witnessed a more elegant or insightful diagnosis. The girl is correct. Her analysis is sound, her theory is valid, and her proposed solution is nothing short of brilliant. She turned to Amora, a warm, genuine smile on her lips. Samuel Washington would have been very, very proud of you. Kenji Tanaka stood as if turned to stone. His face was a canvas of warring emotions. Run a simulation, he finally choked out, his voice a whisper. Now. Model her solution. The engineering team scrambled to their laptops. They created a new digital model incorporating the small, randomly placed baffles Amora had drawn. The entire room, and the thousands watching online, held their breath as they watched the data stream across the main screen. The harmonic frequency charts, which before had shown a massive, terrifying spike, now showed nothing. Just a flat line. Silence. The lead engineer took off his glasses. It works, he stammered. The resonant frequency is gone. The solution is 100% effective. The room erupted. The investors cheered and applauded. In the center of it all stood Amora, a small, calm island in a storm of celebration. Her eyes found her mother's. Maya rushed forward, wrapping her daughter in a fierce hug. The applause eventually subsided, replaced by a thick, expectant silence. Every eye in the room turned to Kenji Tanaka. The world's most expensive IOU had just come due. He could refuse, save the money, and be branded a coward and a cheat. Or he could pay, an eternal monument to his own public failure. Slowly, Kenji walked across the room. He stopped directly in front of mother and child. You have a name? He asked, his voice low and gravelly. Amora, she said, her own voice clear and steady. Amora Washington. He turned his head slightly. Kenso, he commanded his assistant. Get Minister Arai from the finance office on the line. Now a wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Tell the minister to set up a trust. A blind trust administered by the Swiss National Bank. The beneficiary is to be registered as Amora Washington. The principal amount will be $500 million US. A collective gasp swept through the audience. The trust will be independently managed, he continued. Dr. Sharma, I would be honored if you would agree to serve as the trust's primary overseer. Dr. Sharma simply nodded. The funds, Kenji continued, his eyes returning to Amora, will be made available to you upon your 21st birthday. Until then, the trust will cover all your living expenses and the full, unconditional cost of your education. You may choose any university in the world. It will be paid for. It was a masterful maneuver. He was honoring his promise, but recasting himself as the wise benefactor. He then turned his attention to Maya, who stood frozen. Madam Washington, he said, the formal address a stark departure from his earlier contempt. Your employment contract is terminated, effective immediately. A flash of the old fear returned to Maya's eyes. Your services are no longer required on that floor, Kenji continued, because they are required on this one. The Celestial Spire is establishing a new executive department, the Department of Structural Integrity and Systems Oversight. You will be its first director. Your daughter has taught me a very expensive lesson. The most critical details are seen by the people on the ground. Your job will be to be our eyes and ears. You will report directly and only to me. Your starting salary will be $500,000 a year. A corporate apartment, a penthouse on the 100th floor, will be part of your compensation package. Maya stared at him speechless, tears of sheer, disbelieving shock welling in her eyes. While lawyers finalized the trust and the employment contract, Dr. Sharma personally supervised the tower's retrofitting. Amora, at Dr. Sharma's insistence, was present as a paid consultant, wearing a small, custom-made hard hat. On the third day, as the sun began its descent, casting a palette of orange and purple across the sky, the final baffle was bolted into place. A small group gathered once more in the now famous boardroom. Kenji, a humbled Julian Croft, Dr. Sharma, Maya, and Amora. The glass of water sat in its place on the floor. They stood in a profound silence, waiting, listening. The evening wind rose, pressing against the vast windows with a familiar sigh. But inside, there was only peace. The bone-jarring groan was gone. The ripples on the surface of the water stilled, leaving it as placid as a mirror. The celestial spire was finally quiet. The story of the maid's daughter and the billionaire's wager became an instant global legend. Amora Hayes never pursued a formal career in engineering. With Dr. Sharma as her mentor, she traveled the world, studying not for status, but for the pure love of the puzzle. Years later, she established the Samuel Washington Foundation, a multi-billion-dollar endowment for gifted, underprivileged students who wanted to build, create, and solve the world's toughest problems. Director Maya Washington became one of the most respected figures in Tokyo's real estate world. She ran her department with the same meticulous care she had once used to push a cleaning cart, and she never lost perspective from the ground floor. She was the heart of the tower, its guardian, its soul. And Kenji Tanaka was a changed man. The public humiliation had been a brutal but effective cure for his hubris. He went on to build other, even more audacious buildings, but he now held listening sessions, consulting not just with his high-priced architects, but with the very people who would one day build and maintain his creations. Years later, a young journalist was granted a rare interview with Amora on the observation deck of the Celestial Spire. "Everyone calls you a genius," the journalist said. "What's the secret?" Amora looked away from the breathtaking view. "There's no secret," she said softly. "It's just about perspective. Most people look at a tall building and they only see the height. They forget to pay attention to the foundation, and they forget to listen to the wind. My grandfather taught me that the most important lessons aren't found in the boardroom at the top. They're found on the ground floor, where the real work gets done. You just have to be humble enough to look down, and quiet enough to listen from the highest point in the glittering city of impossible dreams, the quietest voice had spoken the loudest and most enduring truth. And the world, for once, had been wise enough to hear it.